You're listening to episode 85, National Sickle Cell Awareness Month. Hello, my friends. I am so happy you are here today because it is another day in September, which means we are going to be recognizing National Sickle Cell Awareness Month. This was mandated by Congress and just brings awareness and advocacy to sickle cell. If you don't know what sickle cell disease is, a great resource is sicklecelldisease.org. But basically, it's an inherited blood disorder in which blood cells may become sickle-shaped and harden. And this causes a lot of pain. Actually, according to sicklecelldisease.org, this is so prominent, you guys. 1 in 13 African Americans carry the sickle cell trait. And many don't even know that they have it. An estimated 100,000 people in the U.S. have sickle cell disease, and approximately 2,000 babies are born with it annually in the U.S. Today on the podcast, I am bringing back Lisa's story, a daughter with sickle cell disease. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to bring to light sicklecelldisease.org's theme for 2021, which is Sickle Cell Matters. And I couldn't think of a better way to describe it myself, that we need to bring a light to this really impactful disease that can permeate every part of a person's life, from deciding, will they have kids with a certain person because they know they're going to pass on the trait? Are they going to be dealing with pain crises their whole life? Has someone in their life previously passed away because of sickle cell disease? And so these are all things that Lisa had to navigate as she was coming into motherhood, and she had her son and then had her daughter. And so I just really encourage you to be thinking, as you're listening to her story, sickle cell matters. It matters to know the facts. It matters to be aware of what's happening, and also to just be really supportive of families who are going through sickle cell disease. So I'm just obsessed with Lisa. She knows it. Like, I follow her on Instagram and probably comment on way too many photos, super creepy. But she's just such a beautiful woman on the inside and the outside who makes you laugh and makes you think. And she just brings to light so many fun things about life, but then is also incredibly thoughtful and serious in a lot of the topics she talks about. So she is at the Lisa Sykes. That's Sykes. So I hope you enjoy this Repost episode to bring awareness to sickle cell disease. All right, guys, thanks so much for listening.
I come from a family of really strong women, but seeing her just being strong, and then also, just leaning on us in the moment when she's, weak, or it makes me feel as if, I should, look for somebody to lean on as well.
Hello, and welcome to the Child Life On Call podcast. I am Katie Taylor, a certified child life specialist and your host. If you are new to this podcast, I am so happy that you are here, and you may be wondering what in the world a child life specialist is and why am I doing this? Basically, a child life specialist is someone who works with children and their families to help them cope with challenges associated with life events, illness, hospitalizations, and so much more. And this podcast started as a place for parents to be able to share their stories and experiences in the hope to find a community when you feel really, really isolated by your child's illness. And I think what we've learned throughout these past episodes is that really, regardless of diagnosis, you're able to find little nuggets of information and experiences and stories that can resonate with you when you're feeling really alone. So that's kind of the purpose of this podcast. And so I'm very glad that you were here today, especially because it is September, and September is a big awareness month for lots of different things. And it happens to be Sickle Cell Anemia Awareness Month. Sickle cell is an inherited blood disorder that affects over 100,000 Americans, and predominantly it affects Black and African Americans as well as Hispanics. So to give you a statistic about how prevalent sickle cell is and why you should be aware of it and listen to this episode, according to the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, sickle cell affects 1 in 365 births of Black or African Americans. So It is just so prevalent and it is all around us. And so it is important to be educated and be aware of why it's happening and what we can do to support those families who are dealing with sickle cell. So I am so honored to be able to share with you my conversation with Lisa Sykes. She shares with us her experience of having a daughter who has sickle cell and actually a son that does not. I don't want to waste any more of your time and I want to get right to Lisa's conversation. So let's get started. I'm pleased to introduce you to Lisa.
So my name is Lisa Sykes. I'm originally from South Florida, from Fort Lauderdale. Actually met my husband while we were in college, our junior year at Florida A&M University. We currently live in Jacksonville with our two little kids, Reggie and Riley. Reggie, he's 9, he'll be 10 in November, and Riley, she is 2, going on 22. Been together 14 years.
Wow.
And married for 7. So we've got some history.
Gotcha. And I was looking at your Instagram and it seems your daughter Riley and my daughter Cameron were born very close. So my daughter was May 3rd, 2018. And when was Riley born?
She was born April 27th, 2018.
Okay, there we go.
Her due date was actually May 5th. But we didn't go that far into the pregnancy because, I guess you could say something strange, weird, like during that last month where you start seeing the OBGYN every week. Yeah. She went from there was one week we went and she was 7 pounds, or 6, nearing 7. And then the very next week, I think it was the 37th week. When I went for an appointment, she was close to 9 pounds. And they was this has to be wrong. Something's wrong. We've been having issues with this machine. And so they send me to a team of specialists. It's called the Rock Clinic here in Jacksonville, Florida. And it's a specialist team. They monitor women who have high risk, pregnancies. Sent me there. Had me do all types of tests. And they were no, they're measuring pretty accurate. She's roughly about 9 pounds. So they were thinking maybe, you're having some type of condition because I was very swollen. I was in a lot of pain. So they monitored me for all types of, utero conditions diabetes, high blood pressure. My blood pressure was fine. My urine tests, had to walk around and pee in a container for 24 hours. All of that came out fine. And so they were yeah, it looks like you just might have a pretty big baby. So we're going to estimate her to be roughly about 9, maybe close to 10 pounds. But I'm pretty sure she'll be 9 pounds. So we come in my 39th week and, we came in for a scheduled C-section and they pulling her out whoa. Oh, she's a big one. And you can just hear the nurses and the doctors in there, just guessing as if, I don't know, bingo, some type of game where you have to guess the numbers, and they put her on the scale and everybody goes nuts. And she's 11.2 pounds, 11 pounds.
Stop it.
Yes, 11 pounds, 2 ounces. She was,
what?
Yes, and she was a pretty big baby. Big baby, even bigger attitude. So I can see how all of that balances out.
Oh my gosh. I feel for you for sure. Oh, because I have to put this in perspective. Cam, my daughter, was 6 pounds, 5 ounces. And so sweet Riley was double her size, literally.
Yes. Double the size of most babies, I guess you can say.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So take us from there. So she comes in she comes into this world nice and big and ready to go. And I guess that kind of leads us into why we're talking today. If you want to tell us a little bit about Riley.
Yes, I guess I can't really say it's something that was brought up during, or we found out during our pregnancy, because we always knew that there was a possibility. When I met my husband in college, he, I guess while we were getting to know each other, I told him that I was Haitian because I'm of Haitian descent. My mother and father, they're from Haiti. And so he was like, "Oh, you're from Haitian descent? You're of Haitian descent. You need to find out if you have the sickle cell trait, because if you have sickle cell trait, then we can't move forward in this relationship." And I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, that sounds pretty ignorant for you to say. I said, if we have a history of sickle cell in my family, I had a cousin that passed with complications from sickle cell, and I knew my sister had the trait. It just kind of sort of totally just went over my head. To not think that maybe I may be a carrier. But I was like, I'm pretty sure my mom would have told me, or I would have known by now. So like, I don't know why you're making a big deal out of this. And he was like, well, I've just always known all my life that I'm a carrier. I have the trait. So I feel like we're moving in a very serious, direction, and I just want to make sure before we move any further that you don't, because I don't want to potentially have a child that may end up with sickle cell disease. How that conversation just came and went, I don't know, because we had that conversation at one point and we never ever had it again until we found out that I was pregnant with my son. And that was just, nerve-wracking, because after we did, because they knew he had the trait, so they wanted to make sure that see whether or not I had the trait as well. So my blood test samples, whatever came back that I had the trait. And so, of course, they explained everything that he explained during that conversation that we had when we were in undergrad. He could either have the trait or he could have the disease. He could have SS or SC. And there's a way that you can find out prior to that. And I forget what the procedure is called, but it's like when they stick a needle into the placenta and they test it to see, what types of diseases that the child can have. But at that time, I believe the percentage or the possibility of me possibly miscarrying was higher than what I know it to be now with that procedure. I was like, I was like, it's not going to make much of a difference anyway. So I opted out of having the procedure. And so, of course, when he's born, it takes weeks. Well, I think maybe like a week or 2 weeks at least for you to get those results. And it was just like nerve-wracking. And we finally got the envelope in the mail, and it took 2 weeks. And my husband, he comes from, I guess you could say, a medical background. His father is a physician. And so he's always just known, like, if there's something that's positive, you'll usually get a call and you'll get it within a couple of days or at least a week. And so this had been 2 weeks, and he was like, I just feel really good. And of course, we got a letter in the mail. And he was like, if this is a letter, then more than likely he doesn't have it or he has the trait. And so we opened the letter and boom, he just has the trait. And so we were excited, happy, relieved to know that my son just was a carrier of the trait. And then fast forward 7 years, we just hoped, I guess, for the same thing. And I was like, I guess, God, looked out, the first time. I'm pretty sure he'll look out again. I mean, we're good parents. Why wouldn't he afford us the opportunity to bring in, a healthy individual into the world? Like, so, hey, let's give this baby thing a try. So, of course, I opt out the second time while I was pregnant with my daughter Riley on having the procedure as well, because I felt like it wasn't going to change my decision or whether or not I wouldn't terminate the pregnancy, because they wanted me to do it early enough so that I can make that decision early on. So I was like, I just want to, enjoy this pregnancy, enjoy every moment of it. That's something that I don't want to know right now. Let's just figure it out when that time comes. So fast forward to me giving birth, and it was about a week. I hadn't heard anything. And then 2 weeks, I think, went by and I hadn't heard anything. And so I'm feeling good because I'm thinking about how things had gone the first time around when I had my son. Yeah. So I'm feeling good. And then finally, while I'm home, struggling, trying to breastfeed, I finally get a call. And actually it was a voicemail, and it was not the hospital where I had my daughter, but it was like a specialty hospital here in Jacksonville, Nemours Hospital. And they left a message like, hey, we've been trying to get a hold of you and your voicemail's been full. So finally give them a call back. And that's when they provided me with the results. So it wasn't that, she was healthy, she was fine. It's just that my voicemail had been full and they couldn't get in contact with me. So so they finally gave me her results and, broke it down, told me that she had the SS as opposed to the SC, because at first when they gave me the results, I was like, okay, she has, sickle cell disease, so I'm just going to pray and hope that the sentence that follows next is that she has the SC, and this is how we're going to manage it. Boom. Of course, it didn't work out that way. And so they shared with me that she had the SS, and told us what our next steps would be in terms of meeting with the hematologist physicians, so that we can properly just manage or begin to manage our care. So I guess you could say that was my experience.
Yeah. I just think about like you sitting on that couch breastfeeding, which is already like just such an emotional experience. And then getting that phone call and, have kind of like already in your head been through this situation before and having to go through it again. And I imagine that was really difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was extremely difficult. In fact, I would say that I fell into a deep depression. And shortly after, I probably tried for another month and a half. And I just couldn't really push myself to do it anymore. She was such a good baby, sleeping, and I just started to notice that as she slept, she would sleep for her 3 hours. She was like clockwork on a really good schedule. Mm-hmm. So I noticed that I would sleep for 3 or 4 hours with her. And then you just know, just that bonding that you have while you're breastfeeding, looking at them, admiring them. It's just every single time just put me in such an emotional state. That I just felt like I couldn't enjoy that moment. Just looking at her and thinking of, her results and all of the pain that she'll have to experience. It's I just couldn't do it. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe if I'll try to pump. And, clearly pumping is just a supplement. It aids, it helps in that, but you really get your production from the actual act of breastfeeding. So the pumping part really didn't last long, especially after finding myself one time just pumping and just falling, bursting into tears. I just couldn't do it. So that didn't last long.
I'm so glad you shared that, because it's it is such an emotional roller coaster, plus everything that you're dealing with too. And the fact that you had the foresight to know, like, this isn't working for me. And if it's not working for me, it's not going to work for her. And then I can't be a good mom to Reggie or to Riley or a good, it's just the trickle down effect. And you have to make those hard decisions. And the fact that you could do that at that time is pretty amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Cause I wasn't really sure if I was, holding it up, but I had my husband there to be, I think he was strong for the both of us, which I didn't really know if he would be able to, because when he got the results as well, because when she called, I called him, and we conferenced him. And at this time he was in, the fire academy. He was in like recruit school to become a firefighter.
Oh, wow.
And that's probably like, I just remember him coming home in tears. I had never, ever seen him cry like that before. But I think after maybe like just talking to, his dad, our family members, we have, a praying family. I think it allowed him to be a little stronger, and it provided him to have the strength that we both needed to make it through that moment. So he was definitely my rock.
Man, it seems like he was able to kind of look at it rationally, and then you take turns the other way, right? Where you do that for him. And it's like, it truly is like the partnership where one person, they never say it's 50-50. It's like sometimes I'm 80 and you're 20 and then we switch and we have to go back and forth. And
exactly.
Be right back. Hey guys, did you know Child Life on Call is more than just a podcast? We have free resources for parents, kids, and professionals. And by the way, a new app coming out in 2022. We will be partnering with facilities to empower and educate kids, parents, and the care team. And we want you to be a part of it. Sign up to have the facility you visit or work for be one of the first to have access at childlifeoncall.com. The praying family is a big thing too, because, it's, of course, your tight-knit family, the four of you who are dealing with this diagnosis, but the grandparents and the aunts and the uncles and the cousins, they all feel that too. And then with your previous experience of losing a cousin, it definitely hits hard.
It did.
Would you be able to tell us a little bit about sickle cell disease? And, it's a blood disorder. And can you elaborate on that for some of us who don't totally understand what it is?
And it's interesting because I thought I knew all that I needed to know about sickle cell, especially when I met my husband and we had that conversation. But it wasn't until I actually had Riley and all of the knowledge that the hematologist provided us, I realized, hey, I don't even know half of the information that is out there to know. But sickle cell disease, it's a blood disorder that affects the hemoglobin. And the hemoglobin is the molecule in the red blood cells that it carries oxygen to the cells throughout the rest of the body. So where you would have like a healthy individual like you and I that would have like a perfectly round, circular, like I like to say quarter shape type of blood cell, the sickle cell disease, it causes for that red blood cell to sickle, hence sickle cell disease. And so people with this disease that have that distorted sickle blood shape, it causes just sometimes like a shortage of oxygen, of course, because of sickle, it can't carry oxygen to the rest of the body, which can ultimately cause them to fall into a sickle cell pain crisis, or like when you think of blood not flowing into different parts of the body, that can cause for, depending on where it's not flowing, it can cause for that organ to just fail. So it can also cause not only the pain crises, it can cause organ failure, and ultimately also a stroke, because you don't have that blood flowing properly sometimes to the rest of the body, and that's including the brain. And so that's a sickle cell disease in a nutshell. In fact, when she turned 2, we started she had her first, it's called a transcranial Doppler, where they test to see if the blood cells are flowing properly to the brain. And that can give them an indication on whether or not she, is at risk for a stroke at a very young age. And that's something that she'll continue to have throughout her life, because, of course, there's always going to be a risk for her. In fact, I spoke to someone who had the SC. I had known this person for a while, didn't know she had the disease. And, SC is a milder form. Most people that you talk to will say that people with SC, they don't experience any complications. So it was interesting to meet this person and to find that she experienced several complications. Ultimately, she experienced a stroke as well. And she had to learn to walk all over again. So, of course, that sent my mind thinking again, like, oh my God, if she has SC and she has to experience all of this, like, I can only imagine what, Bradley is going to have to experience. But yeah, that's sickle cell disease.
You talk a little bit about the pain crises that she has to deal with. And I think about, if she's just 2 now, how do you get her to communicate with you? Or you just kind of in tune with how she's feeling and staying on top of it? Or what have you taught her that has been helpful that she can tell you about how she's feeling?
It's so interesting that you asked that, because she's only really, probably within the last, she's 2. I think her first pain crisis was shortly after she turned 2, maybe a month or 2 months. And at that point, she wasn't communicating as well as she communicates now. So right now she's speaking in full sentences. She can tell you, oh, Mom, that hurt me, or I hurt. But at that time, you just know your child. So, as I mentioned before, she's on a pretty strict schedule. The girl doesn't play about her sleep. My son, on the other hand, he will stay up till 5 a.m. if you let him. But her, no, she doesn't sleep later than 10:30. Roughly around 2:30, she's ready for another nap. You can let her stay up till maybe about 8. At 8 o'clock, sometimes she will grab her blanket and walk towards the bedroom to indicate, hey, I'm ready to go to bed. But
what a dream child. Oh my gosh.
Yes. She was a blessing from God. My son is nothing like that. So, you just know your child. And, this time in particular, she was just real fretful. And I assume, maybe she was just, tired, ready to be, laid down. So I laid her down in bed. But I could still hear her, just whimpering and crying. And she hadn't fallen asleep. Sometimes, it's time for her to go to bed. It's 8 o'clock. And you'll lay her down. She'll probably whine for 10 minutes. But eventually she'll fall asleep. But it had been 20 minutes, and she had not fallen asleep. And so I went into her room to check on her, and she just looked up with this pain, this scariness in her eye. I can't even explain the look that I saw in her eye. And she was just shaking. You could tell that she was trying to get comfortable, but there was a side that she just wasn't it's the side that she likes to roll over and sleep on, but she just couldn't really roll over on that side. And so I picked her up. I put her on the floor, and I stood her on the floor, stood her up on the floor. And normally, if she just wasn't ready for bed, she would just, run on out, play with her brother, and she didn't do that. She motioned for me to pick her back up as if, she couldn't stand. So just that thing kind of sort of triggered, oh my gosh, she just turned 2. I know the last time that we had went, that she had blood work done, they mentioned that she still had a lot of her fetal hemoglobin there, which, they were like, we normally don't see this. It looks pretty good, because without the fetal hemoglobin, which is the good blood cells, and she still had a lot of, my blood in her as well, that would prevent her from having any pain crises. So I was like, the last test she had, they said, her numbers, her blood cells look pretty good. Her hemoglobin looked really awesome. But she just turned 2. That was still a couple of months ago. Let me see. So I backed up a little bit. I stood her on the ground and I told her to walk to me. And I noticed she had a limp and she ultimately couldn't finish the walk. And I was like, okay, so she's having a pain crisis. Called the hematologist. I just wanted to make sure that what they had trained us, I knew. And so I just started to, give her her Motrin. Gave her her Motrin, and she was able to sleep through the night. But when she woke up the next morning, you could still see or still tell that she had that pain in her leg. That didn't stop her from playing and running around, especially as long as you gave her her Motrin and her Tylenol. So that was like the first pain crisis. The second pain crisis happened the same way in the middle of the night, but this time she was crying a lot more. She couldn't walk before it was a limp. This time she just pretty much couldn't walk at all. And then instead of the 24 hours, this one lasted anywhere from 48 to 72. It just seems like that each crisis got worse. Her most recent one didn't, and it wasn't even an issue of walking. You could see that she had a little bit of a limp. But I would lay her down. She wouldn't be able to lay down. She would flip over. She would turn over. She wouldn't sleep. She kind of wanted you to coddle her. So I had to sit up in the recliner with her all night in order for her to sleep. And whenever I tried to pick her up by her arms, depending on how I picked her up or I held her, she would say, "Oh, that hurt. Don't do that. Don't do that, mommy." Or when my husband would try to hold her, or my son would try to, kiss her or hold her, she would be like, "Oh, don't kiss me. That hurt. That hurt." So you can kind of tell this time around the pain was all over her body. Right. Particularly her stomach, because when we took her to the hospital, they felt for her spleen, which is something that they teach us to do. And that's something that I've always been nervous about. I just know I'm going to mess this up. Because being a physician or anything close to a physician, I don't think that was just ever in my calling. Every time they would show me how to, check for the spleen, it's I kind of felt it, but I kind of didn't. And I was I do not want for the most important time where I should be able to detect that there's something going on with her spleen, that I'm not able to detect it and something is actually going wrong with her spleen. And so when we took her to the hospital, they felt it and they were like, "Yeah, her spleen is slightly enlarged." And I was like, oh gosh, I messed up. And, that would explain why she couldn't really lay down to get any type of good rest, because it was enlarged, so it was causing her pain in her stomach. That would explain probably why she wasn't eating, she wasn't really drinking. And this one, I think, started on a Sunday night and didn't really end until Saturday. Wow. So I could say Saturday is when she was able to finally, show signs that she's feeling much better and she was back to her normal self. So I think she was able to communicate, the last one, but the first couple of ones, it was just all about just knowing her and being in tune, with her as a parent, as a mom. So she didn't have to communicate anything at all those first couple of times around.
It just sounds like so much pressure, to have to feel their spleen, to have to be in tune to things when they can't communicate, to say, is this a hospital visit? Is this not? It's just, it's a lot of pressure on you to be making these big decisions. And I'm just kind of wondering, what do you think has helped you kind of cope with all of this? And, how are you dealing with it? Having to have this heavy load on you.
I think just knowing that I have someone else that's watching, and just knowing that, what she's going through, I've literally had to find strength in her strength, the strength that she shows makes me strong. And I think the strength that I show makes my son strong, because I have to keep in mind that we have another child and he's watching. And no matter how much he prayed for a brother, I know that he loves me. I know that he loves his sister. So I always see that when I begin to worry, she begins to worry. And, nothing is private these days. Whenever I'm sending a text message, there's always eyes over my shoulder,
Yep.
And so even the last time when she was in the hospital, while my husband was texting me, he's looking and he's like, oh my gosh, is Riley going to be okay this time? And, he said to me, Mom, I think I'm a little worried. And it just kind of put me in a different place, to where I have to cope so that I can help him cope. Like I have to find strength in her strength so that he can find strength in my strength. Because he's just started school, we're doing things virtually, for now, depending on how things, end up. So I didn't want anything to have an effect on, it's already stressful for them just doing things virtually, and the situation that they're in. COVID has, played a big part, I think, in their lives, and just his feelings. He talks to me a whole lot about his feelings about, just COVID. And so I just didn't really want that to be another thing to affect him and affect his schooling, especially, I think, since they were only literally a week in to virtual school. So I think that's how I cope, just finding strength in the strength that she has.
It's pretty amazing, how these little babies, these children, these teens that don't have near the life experience that we do, we can just really look at them and see how they deal with things and get strength from them. It's pretty amazing.
Yes. Yes.
And thinking about Reggie, it's the fact that he can say to you, Mom, I feel worried about this. That says a lot about, what you do for him. And how he can say that to you and have a safe space back. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So we always welcome opinions. We keep an open line of communication, probably a little too open, because sometimes, Mom, no
Feel
offense.
Your feelings.
Yeah, Mom, no offense, but, and I'm like, okay, you get a cat back here. These lines of communication are a little too open, okay?
I'm waiting for that. My son just turned 5, but it's already starting.
Yeah.
If you could go back to yourself sitting on that couch and getting that phone call about the news about Riley, I'm thinking about another mom that may be listening to this podcast right at the beginning. What is something you would share with them that you've learned over these past couple of years? Or maybe something you wish that you had known
Just to make sure that you stay as educated as possible on the disease. I think especially when they're so young, and them not really having a way to communicate, you just have to really be in tune with that child. And I don't know if there's anything really that I can say, because I feel like as a mother, we just know. We know. But if there's any piece of advice that, I can give, it's just making sure that you continue to be educated on the topics, the subject, the research of sickle cell, because people living with sickle cell today is nothing like, they live fairly normal lives. I guess each case is different, but science now, or science today, is nothing compared to the science there was back in 1995 when my cousin passed from sickle cell. So it's come a long way, and you just ultimately want to trust your team of physicians. We've been blessed with a phenomenal team of hematologists, physicians here in Jacksonville, and I trust them wholeheartedly. So trust your physicians. I know a lot of times we Google. Google is our black doctor.
Yep.
Like my father-in-law said, Dr. Google. My father-in-law said, people come in and they pre-diagnose themselves by the time they come to the appointment. So
we're all guilty of that.
So just make sure you're just, educated. Trust your team of physicians. And ultimately, I think it'll force you to change your lifestyle, because in order for them to be healthy or live healthy lives, they have to consume healthy things. We have to make sure she stays hydrated, which are things that we should be doing for ourselves, as well. So it kind of forces you to make the changes, the necessary changes that you should have made years ago anyway. So just educate yourself and, trust your team of physicians and keep a healthy lifestyle.
I love that, because it's, those are some tangible things that you absolutely can control. We have so many resources at our fingertips, and, the first thing that's up on Google may not be good, but the second one may be, and you can actually do that. And the staying hydrated, I love that. It's another super specific thing that you may not even be processing yet at the beginning, but it's a small tangible thing you can do. And I really like that you shared that. So thank you.
Yes. Well, we all have our water bottles and our water goals for the day. So, yeah.
If you could tell us that one thing that sweet little going on 22-year-old Riley has taught you, since she's come into the world, what would that be?
Girls are strong, but it's okay for them to be weak too. And I say that because I come from a family of really strong women. I don't think I've ever seen my mother cry. Single parent, single mother, 4 kids. We don't cry. We don't show emotion. But seeing her just being strong, and then also, just leaning on us in the moments when she's, weak, it lets me know that, or it makes me feel as if, I should, look for somebody to lean on as well, leaning on my husband in the moments when I'm weak as well. So I think that would be the one thing that, I've learned, from her. It's okay to cry. It's okay to have a moment. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to need to be held, all of that is okay. And you can still be identified as a strong woman. So Yeah, I would say that's what I've learned from her. Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to share any of your favorite resources that you have kind of found in the past couple of years that you feel like you've really been able to go to? I know you mentioned your team of physicians, which is huge, but if there's any other things that would be accessible to people listening to the podcast.
Yes. So there is an Instagram group called Sickle Cell 101. You can follow them on Instagram. They share a wealth of knowledge, and they try to stay, or they do stay, as up to date as possible with, just the medical advances that are going on in the sickle cell world. There's also a book that our hematologist physicians gave us at our first appointment, right after they shared with us her diagnosis. It's called Hope and Destiny. A Patient and Parent's Guide to Sickle Cell Anemia by Dr. Alan, I think it's Sacerdoti. And it kind of sort of breaks down like age to age of what you can, expect, which I felt was like just really helpful for me, because I was one of those moms that had, with my first pregnancy, Riley as well. Okay, it's third trimester, 6 months. What can I expect this week? So that book was really helpful in that aspect. And then someone gifted me like an awesome book. It's called Super Cells, and I posted that. I shared that on my Instagram by Princess Walls, and it's a kid book that explains, the complications that someone with sickle cell anemia experiences. And I just thought I thought the play on the words, instead of sickle cells, is super cells that, she has on a cape. And my daughter identifies that, oh, Mom, she has a cape. She's strong. She's super like me, sickle cell. And I just thought that this was just so, cool. And, she has cousins that, often ask, why is Riley in the hospital? Or what is wrong with Riley? So for anybody who's, looking to, break it down in the simplest terms of, what their child may be experiencing for their siblings or, their cousins or other children at their school, I think Super Cells by Princess Walls is an awesome book. So someone actually, gifted that to me. And then I gifted a book to my nieces as well. And so awesome resource for kids.
Thank you so much for listening to the Child Life On Call podcast. As always, I just absolutely love having you here. It's such an honor that we were named in the top 100 parenting podcast in our little corner of the world, spreading awareness and stories about parents who are coping with kiddos who have challenging life events and difficult medical experiences and diagnoses and diseases. It's so important for others to understand what parents are going through and the impact that their child's illness can have on them. So please continue to share. And you know what I'm about to say is that the diagnosis of these stories actually doesn't matter in a lot of cases. The feelings and the emotions behind the words of parents are what matters, and that's where we find connection. So please continue listening, please continue supporting, and please know how grateful I am that you're listening to this. All right, bye guys. See you again next week.